Most people picking a niche for their agency start by asking the completely wrong question. They go straight to which industry pays the most, which has the biggest retainer, which niche the most popular video said was the best one. And so they end up chasing dental, legal, financial advisors, med spas, because someone put a number next to them and it looked attractive. But that's not why people fail to land clients. It's not because they picked the wrong industry off a list. It's because they optimized for size when they should have optimized for access. They built everything before they sold anything, and they treated their first niche like a permanent decision instead of a starting point. I'm going to give you the full framework for picking a niche and deciding what to actually build first. And the one thing that I want you to keep in mind through all of it, the thing that changes everything else is this. The variable that matters most at the beginning isn't how much the niche pays. It's how much you can already get into it. That's the insight this whole video is built around, and we'll keep coming back to it. So section 1, stop leading with retainer size. Retainer size is not a useless metric. It just shouldn't be the first one. Here's what happens when it is. You pick a niche because it sits at the top of someone's list. You spend weeks building outreach sequences, writing scripts, learning the industry's language, and then you find out you can't get past the receptionist, or the niche has been hammered so hard by other agencies that nobody's picking up the phone anymore, or the business in it can't actually sustain a monthly fee without cutting straight into their personal income. The classic example is real estate. It consistently ranks near the top of the niche list because commission potential and apparent ROI on automation. But in most markets, the top few percent of agents make the majority of the commission, and the rest, the ones you can actually reach, are on inconsistent income. A retainer comes directly out of what they keep. So the segment of that industry that are accessible are also the same segment that can least afford to stay on a monthly fee. High ceiling, very low floor for the people you'll actually be talking to. Compare that to something like manual labor or trade-based businesses, lower headline numbers per client, but the owner picks up his phone, the pain is immediate, a missed call in the middle of a summer heatwave is a job worth thousands, going straight to a competitor. And he already knows that. You're not introducing a new concept to him. You're naming something he thought about last Tuesday. That's the difference between a niche that looks good and a niche that actually works. Optimize for access first, and retainer size becomes something you earn your way into later, once you've got the proof. So section 2, start with what you already have. Before you look at any list, ask yourself this question: where do you already have a way in? Did you work in an industry before this? Do you have a contact, a family member, an old colleague who runs a business, or knows people who do? Is there a community you're already part of? Somewhere where mentioning what you're building might actually land rather than being ignored? Most people skip straight past this step because it doesn't feel strategic. It doesn't feel like you're making a considered business decision. It almost feels like cheating, but it isn't that at all. It's the most underused advantage most people have at this stage in their business, and it's worth a lot more than it actually looks like. Here's why. Your first few clients are not really about the money. They are just about proof, a result, a screenshot, a quote from someone who paid you and got value and will say so. And the fastest route to that is a conversation that starts from a position of partial trust rather than a cold pitch to a stranger. Cold outreach works. People build real businesses off of it, but it's slower, especially at the start when what you actually need is momentum, not the theoretically optimal niche. So if you've got a warm way in somewhere, even somewhere with a smaller retainer ceiling, use it. Say something like, I'm building out an automation service and I'm looking for a couple of businesses to work with closely. Would you be open to a conversation about whether this fits? That's all it takes to start. The advantage of that existing relationship does the rest. Section 3, your first niche isn't a permanent decision. A lot of people treat picking a niche like they're choosing what they're doing for the next 10 years. So they just sit on it for weeks, trying to make the perfect call and end up not picking anything at all. The niche you start in is a starting point. It is not a commitment. What you know about a niche from the outside, how easy it is to reach, how businesses in it actually talk, what they actually respond to, whether your automation actually delivers the kind of obvious result that makes that next sale easier. Almost none of that is knowable before you're actually in that industry already. You find it out by being inside it, which means picking something and going is almost always better than optimizing on paper. The skills don't stay locked in the niche either. What you learn about running a discovery call, building a working automation, pricing it, handling objections, none of that is industry specific. It transfers. The niche is the wrapper and it's not the thing itself. So the person who starts in junk removal because their cousin runs a removal company, spends a year there, builds proof, learns the motion, and then moves somewhere different, maybe a more preferred niche, they're not behind, they're ahead because they've got case studies and a working process. which is actually what the person who spent that same year trying to pick the perfect niche doesn't have. Don't let "what if I pick wrong" stop you from picking anything at all. Picking something and learning beats waiting for the perfect one every time. Section 4. You don't have to just pick one. Most advice says pick one niche, go deep and stay there. That's the right advice eventually, but it's not always the right advice at the very start. And there are a few legitimate reasons to run 2 or 3 niches in parallel early on. The first one is access again. If you've got a warm contact in roofing and a different one in dental, there is no rule that says you ignore one because it's not your chosen niche. A warm conversation that's sitting in front of you is worth more than a cold one in your ideal industry. The second one is signal. Running outreach across 2 or 3 niches at once, even loosely, tells you very quickly which one is actually responding. You'll be looking at real reply rates, real conversations, real information. That's a much better basis for narrowing down than guessing from a spreadsheet. Some people deliberately use their first month as a live test across a few niches, specifically to find out where the real access is, rather than committing to one blind. And the third is seasonality. Some niches go quiet for 2 or 3 months a year. If your entire client base is in one of those industries, you'll feel every quiet period just as hard. A second niche with a different rhythm running alongside it smooths out that while you're still getting started. But the caution, don't let testing a few niches turn into never actually focusing on one thing. That is the trap that a lot of people fall into. 2 or 3 in parallel early on to find real signal, that's fine. Still running 5 unrelated niches a year in with no depth into any of them, that's avoidance dressed up as a strategy. Start broader if it suits where you are, but know what you're looking for and narrow when the data tells you to. So section 5. Check these 3 things on any niche. Once you've got a niche or 2 of them in mind, there are 3 things that you need to check before you put serious time into them. The first is whether the pain is already felt. Do the businesses in this niche already know they have a problem that you're solving? Or would you spend the first 20 minutes of every call trying to convince them that that pain point exists? Dental practices already know their no-show rate. They've probably got it in a spreadsheet. You're not introducing a concept, you're pointing at a number that they already think about. But a contractor with slightly clunky scheduling probably isn't losing sleep over it. And that's a real difference in how every conversation goes. You want to be naming something they already feel, not teaching them that they should feel it. The second is whether the revenue repeats. Some niches like high-end remodeling, solar, kitchen, bathroom contractors, these will all have large single deal sizes, sometimes running from 5 figures well into 6. But the revenue is lumpy. A solar lead reactivation campaign can generate a strong month and then go quiet for 3 months, because the purchase decision is something that homeowners sit on for years. Neither model is wrong, but an agency built off entirely one-off lumpy deals is a much harder cash flow position rather than one that includes recurring work. Know which one you're picking. The third is how reachable the industry actually is. Some owners pick up their phone. Others are behind a receptionist whose whole job is to screen calls like yours. And some niches, roofing is the most talked about example, have been pitched so hard for so long by so many different agencies running similar playbooks that even a strong offer lands on pure fatigue. Test it before you commit. Make 20 outreach attempts in a niche and then see how they actually reach a decision maker. If you're consistently hitting walls, that is information for you. Section 6, build one thing and not a suite. Here's the build mistake almost everyone makes. They pick a niche and immediately start building everything. The voice agent, the chat widget, the reactivation campaign, the review system, the full stack before they've sold a single thing. The logic is that more to offer means a better chance of landing someone, but it does the complete opposite. You spread limited time across 4 half-built things instead of 1 finished one. And when you get on your first call, you've got nothing to actually show for it. You're describing what they could build hypothetically if they sign. And that's a weak position, much weaker than showing them something working. Build one functional automation, scoped to the single biggest, most obvious pain point in your chosen niche. Not a prototype with placeholder data, something actually working that you can either run live on the call or show a short recording of. If missed calls are what are bleeding that niche dry, build the voice agent that catches one and books the follow-ups. If it's old leads going cold, then build the reactivation flow that brings one back. That's it, the rest can be done later. And here's what changes when you do it that way. Instead of saying, what I build for you is a system that handles your missed calls and re-engages old leads, you say, here's one I already built for a business in your industry. Do you want to see how it runs? Those are completely different conversations. One asks them to trust your description of a future state. The other asks them to watch something working. And that's where the access point comes back around. Because the business you've got a warm way into is also the most likely to give you the time to show them something real, rather than screening you out before you get there. Section 7, make the first offer risk-free. Once you've got that one working build, the way you offer it matters massively, and it almost matters as much as the build itself. Keep the upfront fee very modest, in the low hundreds depending on what you're deploying, and tell them plainly, if this doesn't perform the way I've shown you, I'll refund every penny, no questions asked. That single move removes the main thing stopping a first-time client from saying yes, which is the risk of paying someone with no track record for something unproven. This only works if you've actually done the earlier steps. You'll only be able to offer a refund credibly because you've built something that actually works. And you only get takers who stay if you've picked a niche that already feels the pain. Because if they don't feel it, the risk-free offer doesn't create real urgency. It just gets you a refund request from people who were never really bought in to begin with. The proof of concept offer is how you bridge from 0 clients and 0 case studies to the first one. And the first one is what changes everything after it. So here's the full picture. Don't lead with retainer size, lead with access. Ask where you already have a way in before you look at any list. Treat the first niche as a starting point and not a career choice, because these skills transfer. The niche doesn't have to. Test 2 or 3 niches in parallel at the start if the access or the seasonality makes sense. Arrow when the data tells you to, not before. Check the pain is already felt, the revenue structure suits where you are, and the niche is actually reachable before you put serious time into it. And build one thing, not a suite. One working automation, scoped to the biggest pain point that you can show on a call rather than describe it. And offer it with the risk removed, because by that point you'll have earned the right to make that offer. Pair this with the outreach system that we covered in the last video and you've got the full front end of getting clients sorted, from picking where to play to showing up with something real, to then closing the deal itself. The next video is going to cover exactly what happens on the call itself.